Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Awake to Oneness Radio. I am Caroline Chang, your host. The mission of Awake to Oneness Radio is to inspire the world to awaken to the universal truth of oneness. Science and spirituality are both telling us that we are all connected, that we are all one. So what you do to another person, you are literally doing to another aspect of yourself. And when the world awakens to this universal truth of oneness, there will be peace on earth. Today's topic is radical gratitude with Will Pye. Will is a spiritual teacher and author of Blessed with a Brain Tumor. He has an amazing life experience to share with our listeners. Welcome, Will, to Awake to Oneness Radio.
It's great to be here, Caroline. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. One thing I love about internet radio and podcasting, it is global. And I'm having more and more guests that are calling from internationally. Will is now located in the UK. And because of the time difference, we are pre-recording this show. We actually had scheduled to pre-record the show yesterday. In the U.S., we changed to daylight savings time last Sunday. And in the U.K., they're not on daylight savings time, which I did not know that until yesterday. But they say you learn something new every day. So I learned yesterday that the world does not change to daylight savings time on the same day. But welcome, Will. I am so glad we connected today. Now we are 4 hours difference, and in a week or so we will be 5 hours difference. So how are you it's morning here, afternoon there. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderfully well, Caroline. Yeah, it's really good to be here in this moment with you.
Thank you. Yes, in this moment. Even though we know time is an illusion, but when we're trying to connect, we have to get that time correct so we can be
Absolutely.
in the now together.
Uh-huh.
So, Will, could you please share with our listeners your journey, your story? You have an amazing life experience to share. So please share with our listeners your journey.
Sure. Where would you like me to start?
I'd like you to start wherever you would like to start.
Mm-hmm. So I guess where to start the story. It's always an interesting thing where to start the life story or where to start the biography because everything is one continuous experience, and where was the beginning of the spiritual search, or where was the beginning of the awakening? Or I guess what I would say is what's brought me here to being in conversation with you now is, I think, two things, Caroline, two driving forces. One of them was suffering, and the other one was desire to know the truth. And
well, can you repeat that? I didn't hear that clearly. Your mic went out for a second.
So the two driving forces in my life have been suffering, a desire to escape suffering, a desire to transform my own experience. So that would be the push, I guess, and then the pull. There was this, from quite a young age, a hunger to know the truth, to know for myself what all this was about. Is there a God? If there is a God, what is God? Who am I? Why am I here? All these big questions. And from a young age, I recall being fascinated by this and really imagining, in particular, a particular obsession maybe obsession's too strong a word, but a very strong curiosity in my early years, in my childhood, was trying to imagine what death was. I remember just being fascinated, like how does this end? Mm-hmm. How does this cease to be? And I recall struggling to imagine with the mind what it would be to not be, what it would be to cease. And I mention that because later on in life, I came back to a clarity as to the nature of life and therefore the nature of death. But that's a little bit along in the story. Certainly in those early years, it was just one of those big questions that I pondered very deeply. And I had a wonderful upbringing. I was very lucky with beautiful, loving parents and got to play outside in a beautiful little village in Hertfordshire in the UK. We're about 45 minutes north of London, and yeah, really, really blessed and beautiful childhood. The suffering that
I'm losing you again, audio. You still there?
I'm still here, yeah. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes. If for some reason occasionally your mic will go in and out. Okay, but I'm hearing you clearly now. Okay,
great. Well, let's pray to the internet gods and
very true.
We'll trust that's going to take care of itself. The suffering that has been such a driving, shaping force in my experience of life, as for many people, began in my teens. My parents went through a divorce, and that was very troubling. And however, it wasn't really until my early 20s. I kind of thought I knew what depression was. And then in my early 20s, I had an experience of such an intense depression that I realized my dismissal of depression previously was a real arrogance, and it was quite debilitating. And this deepened my desire to understand the nature of this experience and who I am and what the mind is and so on. And I realized in my early 20s, I was by this point out in New Zealand. I'd gone traveling and enjoyed living in Australia for a while, and then went over to New Zealand. And New Zealand was really a place of rebirth and the beginning of the spiritual search, if you like, or the spiritual quest in earnest. So I was in this suffering, in this despair, in this hopelessness, really questioning why I was on the planet, what the point of it all was. I was relatively successful, but really not happy. From that despair, there was an intense movement in action, in inquiry, in exploration, and I began to read a lot of spiritual texts. I began to meditate a lot. I began to practice yoga and change my diet. I became a vegetarian. I began to practice karate and
At what age? What age did you start this?
This was around 21 to 22. Yeah. I'm not so good with numbers and age and dates, but when I was in New Zealand, it was 21, 22. You know, I'd left university and was a year or two into this traveling experience and living on the other side of the world. And yeah, so 21 or 22. And like many people, I made really quick progress in that first 6 months of meditating and changing how I was living reality. And I began to learn a bit more about what I am and about what sort of power we have in our mind, in our attention, in intention as well. Something quite significant happened as well, in that for the first time in my life, I asked for help. So until then, I had been vigorously independent, and I could do everything by myself. And yet such was the despair that I sought help, and I got counseling, and some very kind, wise people came into my life. And so not only did I ask for help, but I discovered that when we do ask for help, it's available, that life will actually present us with people to facilitate our next stage of evolution or development. And that's just become more and more and more true in more beautiful ways as that quest has continued and life has continued to unfold. And I stayed in New Zealand. The next experience that comes to mind that was really a big part of my spiritual unfolding and a big moment. I was back in Australia, so this would have been a couple of years later. I would have been 24 now, I think, maybe 25. And I was back in this despair again, this existential dissatisfaction with being. I was doing well in my professional life. I was successful in all outward ways, and yet there was still this persistent nagging despair or heaviness in my experience. Much had been learned, much had evolved and grown, and yet here there was another roadblock, it seemed. And I recall this one evening, I was now in Melbourne in Australia, a wonderful city, and I heard about a Zen teacher, a Zen master, a guy called Junpo Dennis Kelly Roshi. And I kind of liked the sound of this guy. I'd read an interview with him in a magazine, and my friend, I know him at the time, he said had come for and was organising this tour that Junpo was doing in Australia. And this evening he was coming to give a talk, and I'd scheduled to go along, I'd intended to go along, and I nearly didn't. On the way there, I was thinking, I may just go to a bar and have a glass of wine instead. I'm not sure if I'm really in the mood for seeing this Zen master. What's he going to say, sort of thing. But something took me to this meeting nonetheless. And I remember I turned up and I was in this sort of contracted mood, not in a good mood, pretty self-involved, caught up in the mind's thinking. And this Zen master walks in, and within a couple of minutes of him walking into the room, I experienced an altered experience of being. Now, this altered experience of being, it wasn't new. It wasn't new in relation to what I had been feeling. I mean, I could recognize it as, yes, this spaciousness, this peace, this clarity, this lightness. And all this before I'd really recognized what he was even saying. It was just in those first couple of minutes. And during the talk, he spoke about how when a Zen teacher or a Buddhist teacher gives a Dharma talk, as they call it, the idea is that they speak to the Buddha at the back of the room. In a Dharma hall, traditionally there would be a Buddha statue at the back of the room. And Junpo explained that what happens in these talks, the idea is that, excuse the interruption in the background for a moment there.
That's okay. Cell phones. We're in that age.
Indeed. The idea being with the Buddha, the back of the room, the Zen master or the teacher addresses that Buddha rather than the people. The idea being that is symbolic of, representative of, the Buddha nature, the oneness, we could say, of the Zen master, speaking to the oneness, speaking to the Buddha nature of those that are present listening to the Dharma talk. And I remember that struck in my mind. It stuck in my mind because that was kind of how I experienced it. There was a transmission of sorts, and there was a remembrance of what I am. And in that moment, I thought, I want what that guy's got. That is of such use, to be able to walk into a room and affect the consciousness of other people simply by the power of your own presence and intention. I'd been working in fundraising, raising money for charities, and very happily having a positive impact in the world. And here I recognized there was something on a very deep and fundamental level where transformation and change could be affected. So soon after, I found myself, I couldn't actually make the retreat in Australia that he was giving, but I soon after was on a plane to the US, attending the next retreat he was giving in the US. And I continued to work with Junpo and his Hollow Bones order and Mondo Zen, a particular form of Zen that integrates emotional inquiry with Zazen, with meditation, with the usual forms of Zen, for a number of years, and continued to attend the occasional retreat and have great gratitude for Junpo and the effect he had on me that day.
Mm-hmm. So how I actually found you on Facebook was your group called Radical Gratitude, and that just the name of the group is what drew me to the group, because I've been practicing keeping an appreciation, a gratefulness journal, pretty much daily since 2010. Mm-hmm. And I try to, first thing in the morning, go through all the things and write them down. I like to write it down, what I'm grateful for. So I stay focused throughout my day, in every moment, on all of my many blessings, because we are all truly blessed. But people tend not to focus on the little blessings. It's a beautiful day outside. Take a walk in nature. Just smell the roses, as they say. Truly, and appreciate what all the beauty that is surrounding us in every moment. So share with our listeners that presence of radical gratitude in each moment, and how that helped you when you were faced with some difficulties.
Sure. So gratitude, it's funny hearing you mention that, Caroline, radical gratitude in particular. I'm writing radical gratitude each morning these days. So there's a combination of my experience of gratitude for waking up and the experience of appreciation for writing this book, my second book. And radical gratitude, it came into my life. I didn't call it radical gratitude in those moments, but it came into my life around that time that I was speaking of, in the mid-20s. It arose when this suffering, this pain inside, became too much. And all my attempts to escape it, to not feel the pain, had been ineffective. It kept on coming back. It kept on wanting to be felt. And I'd been practicing gratitude as a daily practice, as you speak of, and so I was familiar with we could say, the energy or the frequency of gratitude. I was familiar with that posture, energetic. And the intuition came for a change, rather than push away the pain, to actually welcome it and say thank you. To welcome this suffering into my experience and say thank you. And that was really a pivotal moment of loosening and opening and awakening. And you refer to the events that happened. I was 31, so fast forwarding a few years, and life was good. I now have my own business, and life was good. And again, I wasn't as fulfilled as I could be. And one day I was running on the treadmill in the gym to get fit, and experienced a grand mal seizure. And a few hours later, I was being informed by the neurosurgeon that I had a brain tumor. And curiously, my experience was fascination. There was no suffering.
There was no panic.
No panic whatsoever. Not even any sort of mild stress. It was like just watching a movie, a very interesting movie. It was like, wow, this is a really curious plot twist. I didn't see this coming. I wonder what's going to happen next. This is interesting. That was the sort of energy, quite light, that came with this news, and there wasn't any denial. There was a clarity as to what this might mean, and it was initially thought to be a low-grade brain tumor. But when I had surgery several years later, I discovered through the pathology results that it was actually cancerous. And the same peace, the same gratitude for the entirety of experience, the entirety of what had unfolded and was now in this moment was present. And a big part of that, and this is really central to understanding how I was blessed with a brain tumor and how that was my experience, was in that first little while after the diagnosis, before I'd had surgery, just in that first few months, I recognized that if I was unwilling to die, then I had a problem. Because, of course, a brain tumor diagnosis, and indeed a human being diagnosis, if we're alive, we're going to have to die. So anyone that has a problem with dying has a problem, of course. And I recognized that I needed to become comfortable with death. And so I mentioned earlier how there was this wondering what death is as a child, trying to imagine what death is. And now I had a stronger motivation to really dive into what it means to not be in this moment. And what I discovered in this persistent sort of thought experiment, in this persistent imagining, was that in dying, in the experience of dying, of me falling away, there is eternal life. There is infinite and eternal being.
So
and
true.
That is what I am. And so this had been experienced before, Caroline. There were insights, moments of that before, but now it was so full in the experience. It wasn't something that stopped. It wasn't something that started and stopped. It was just like, oh, wow. I am this presence, this infinite and eternal being.
Exactly.
Having a human experience, yeah.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Exactly. That is so true what you're saying. My journey of spiritual growth has brought me to that awareness that I don't even use the word death anymore. I use the word transition, because just like birth is a transition into this existence that we have chosen, and what people call death is a transition to the next aspect of life. It's all life. It's eternal life. And it's the other thing that helps me on my journey in each moment is knowing at my core that this is something I chose and something I'm creating. I'm creating in each moment. So whatever shows up, I own it. In the sense, I own it. It's like, okay, I created that. And I know that I created it for a higher purpose. I created it for a good purpose, whatever shows up in my life. I'm not sure if you're aware that I lost my only son about 1.5 years ago. And on the day that he passed, he was in the hospital for several months, but on the day that he passed, there was a sense of peace that came over me. I knew that this was his soul's plan. I knew there was no death. I knew that he was just his soul, his higher self has chosen to go on to the other aspect of life, and that he would still be with me. Even I may not be able to see him physically or speak with him physically, I knew he would still always be with me. Actually, even now that he's in spirit, I know that he's closer to me because he's with me all the time. When he was here in the physical, he wasn't with me all the time. So we're actually closer now. And I knew that it was a pre-birth plan on his part. And he chose me to be his mom. And he chose not to live a long life. But that experience was also to, you're there? Okay.
I'm still here. I'm sorry, it's the house phone. So
oh, it's the house phone.
Yeah, I'll see if I can disconnect it now. I'll just reach across and do that.
Okay. Interesting ringtone. But I knew on the day that he passed I was at peace because I knew that it was a pre-planned. We planned this experience together. So I was at peace. And so I understand what you mean when you received the news of a brain tumor. It was like, okay, this wasn't this wasn't what we planned in our human consciousness, but it was a soul plan.
Yeah, and that's such a profound aspect of this experience to become clear on as you have, to really develop that trust.
Right.
In what's unfolding.
Trust and faith. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's
I just want to apologize to our listeners because we are connecting via the internet because of the distance. International call would just be too expensive. And just because of the audio going in and out a little bit, I just wanted to apologize in advance to our listeners. But I am hearing you clearly occasionally. It goes in and out, but I'm getting the gist of everything you are saying. So I just wanted to put that apology out to our listeners. Okay, so please tell us more on your experience with having the brain tumor and then coming to the point where you wrote the wonderful book, Blessed with a Brain Tumor.
Well, I was certainly curious as to how it was that the experience was so easy, that it was without suffering, that it was experienced as an opportunity, that it was actually experienced as expansive and in service of my well-being. And so that question was being asked. I was like, what's the essence of this? And how can I share that essence with others? This opening into the deathless, this realization of what I am, is priceless.
Yes.
It is
so true.
Absolutely priceless, and it seems to want to be shared.
Yes, yes. I believe going through my experience was what springboarded me into what I should be doing, which was starting this radio show to help inspire others to awaken to the truth of who they really are. And that your experience is also the same. We had different experiences, but it brought us kind of to the same conclusion as what we should be doing with our life is sharing it to inspire others to awaken to this truth.
Yeah, it's a shape of experience, if you like, that I encounter very often. Just yesterday, a lady got in contact with me who had experienced a brain tumor diagnosis and was now teaching and coaching, having had a very powerful awakening experience. And so it's such a beautiful thing to consider, that the intense times, the challenges, the losses, the griefs, the difficulties have at their core, in the deepest essence, love. They actually have a our best interests at heart.
Yes.
And the mind will, of course, rebel against that very often. If you tell the average person in the street that this is how it is, that may not be well received. And yet, of course, there is a part of us that knows this truth. And I experience gratitude. You mentioned the practice, Caroline. I think the practice, it's a way of actually accessing that part of ourselves that is receiving the beauty, the love, the well-being that's always here and is all around us, but we can certainly disconnect from. We can choose to disconnect from, whether it's consciously or unconsciously.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Very true. I had recently listened to an audio book of Helen Keller. Are you familiar with who Helen Keller is?
Absolutely, yeah. I've read her. I forget the title of her main book, but I have read it. Right.
Her autobiography is, I believe the title is The Story of My Life, which is amazing. And it's actually the entire audio book is free on YouTube. So I was so inspired after listening to it, because this is a lady that her physical senses of sight and hearing she didn't have. So because of not having those physical senses, she was able to vibrationally feel the love of everything all around her. Just like you were talking, it is all love. And we're so busy in the mundane things of life, of our physical reality, we're not tapping into spirit, which is real and which is around us and loving us 24/7. And what was so amazing is just listening to her audio book, you can hear it in her words, how she was so in touch with, vibrationally, she was so in touch with what was real, which was spirit. And I just thought that was so beautiful. I had to write a little blog about it on my website, because it's just amazing how she was blessed. She was blessed by her disabilities. She was blessed not to have sight or hearing, and also by not having sight and hearing, she was always in the now. She was always present, because her senses were wide awake. Her every cell in her being was sensing what was around her, because she didn't have the hearing and the sight, so she had to use her body, and every cell in her being was in the now. So she was living life in the now, fully present and experiencing it. You know, it's so amazing, her story. So I do encourage anyone who has the time to just take a listen to that audio book online. But that, yes, and when I thought about your book, Blessed with a Brain Tumor, she was blessed with, and she wasn't born. Some people may not be aware, she wasn't born sightless and deaf. She went deaf and lost her sight from an illness at the age of 19 months old. So that, you know, her challenges in life were also a blessing, which is true for everybody. But I do hear what you're saying. Someone that is going through it right in this moment, someone who is just given a cancerous diagnosis, someone who child is ill and may not survive the night, someone, you know, all these things that people are experiencing in this now moment, that they, you know, it's going to be hard for them to see it as a blessing. But when you awaken to the truth of who you are, you're able to see the blessing in every challenge. Because, number one, we're not this physical experience. This is just one of many. But I'll let you continue sharing more about your book and your work.
Sure. So I think that it's always good to continue on from what you're pointing to there, to be starting wherever we're at, and
exactly.
Finding the joy or the opportunity in a brain tumor. Obviously, that was built up to with other experience, and a lot of the work that I do with people is around how to develop that habitual tendency to find the good, to find the opportunity, to find the gift, to, when faced with a challenge, ask the question, what is the opportunity here? If something works out that didn't go the way you wanted it to ask the question, what's the gift here? And even to ask a really powerful question, particularly with the big stuff, if I had chosen this, if I had chosen this in order to learn a significant lesson, a powerful lesson, what is that lesson? Mm-hmm. What is that lesson? And so for me, the answer to that question with the diagnosis of the tumor was to receive love, to actually truly receive love, to allow love to find its way into every corner of my being, into all my thoughts, into all my pains, into all my emotions, into every single aspect of my experience. And that determining of the key lesson, that finding out what was most important for me, was really central, I believe, to my good health and to my well-being. To really get clear that, as you were pointing to earlier, there is this love all around us, and we have the capacity, the ability to choose to let in. And gratitude can be a way, particularly gratitude. I use that phrase to point to those times where we might not want to be grateful for something, to actually lean in and offer a little thank you, and to discover that even here that love is present as well. Yes,
very true, very true. And that's true with all of our challenges, and the key lesson is love, is to see the love. Even I say every action is an action of love, because it's either an action of love or a cry for love. What we feel when we feel like we're being attacked, that person just needs more love. So love is the answer to everything. And I know a lot of people are saying, what does she mean, love is the answer? It's true. And when that resonates, because we are all love at our core, and when that resonates with you, that is the lesson. That's what we came here to experience, is love and to be loved. So that's so true. And being in the moment, being present, knowing that every moment you're exactly where you're supposed to be in every moment. So just for example, yesterday we didn't get to pre-record the show, and you and I both like, oh, well, it wasn't meant to be, for yesterday. It'll still happen, but it'll happen in exactly the perfect moment for it to happen. There's no worries. And it's a beautiful and freeing way to live when you know that you're exactly where you're supposed to be in each and every moment, and what you need in that moment will appear in that moment. You don't have to worry or fret, and abundance is all around all of us all the time. We just have to open our heart and our eyes and our minds to the abundance that is all around, and the love that is all around us. So one of the things I love about doing this show is I'm meeting people globally like yourself all over the world that understands this truth, of just living your life in to its fullest in each and every moment, and appreciating what life brings, because that's why we're here, and following your passion. So there's so many wonderful tidbits of information that come from having conversations with people like yourself who are open and understand the truth of oneness and understand the truth of love. The oneness and love, I kind of equate. They're the same to me. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the quality of consciousness, very, very often in spiritual circles, the non-dual realization is characterized as empty, as emptiness, and there's a profound truth in this. And yet, also, at once, it's full of love, of a deep care, of a deep compassion, and this is a wonderful thing to be able to share. As we were saying, this wants to be shared. This love wants to be shared. It has a natural movement to want to express and to find its way to others. And at this time on the planet, there's certainly a great need. Many people, many crises, for us to meet this with love, for us to meet this with peace, to take action, of course, as well, and yet to come from a place of peace, to come from a place of unity, of love, of well-being in our own experience.
Exactly. Yes, that the first step in taking, for me, in taking action is finding that peace within, because then you'll operate from inspired action, which will inspire others. And I'm finding that once you have awakened to the truth of who you are, the first thing you want to do is share it with others. So, and sometimes not everyone awakens differently. It's an individual, unique thing, and not everyone is ready. When you might be all excited and you try to present them with something totally new, and they may not be ready, but it's okay, understanding that it's okay. They are where they're at. We're all on a spiritual journey, whether we know it or not. We're all spirit. We're all part of the divine. We're all on a spiritual journey. And wherever that person is, we have to understand, okay, they are where they're at. We can share with love, and what they receive, and, we have to take the judgment out of it. I learned that, in my walk, that I can't judge if a person is really, what you would say, attached to the illusion, attached to the ego mind, wants to, react to everything with attack and fear. I cannot judge them if that's where they're at. We're all going to get to the place where we're awakened, and there is no time. So right now, they're where they're at, and all I can do is give them more love. That is my only response. I can't judge them for where they're at. And that's the beauty of oneness, too, I believe, is it takes the non-judge. That person is another aspect of you anyway. So if you're judging them, all you're doing is judging yourself.
Yeah, I tend to talk about other people, particularly people we experience difficult when working with groups and so on, is to very much look at them as teachers, particularly individuals that we're working, if there's, for example, a boss or someone that we're encountering regularly and we're regularly experiencing reactivity or judgment or being triggered, then here we have reason to be wonderfully grateful to that individual, because they are giving us the opportunity to deepen, to expand, to see where we are still in the mind or in reaction or in judgment. And as you were pointing to recognize that this too is an invitation for love and a chance for us to expand into that great art of returning non-love with love. Yes,
that is so true, because, well, you say non-love, but it's really a cry for love. They're really if I say this all the time, the people that drive us crazy the most in our life are our greatest teachers. They, like you say, they inspire us to take a look at, okay, what's inside of me that is reacting to their behavior. So they're our greatest teachers, and I recently wrote a list of about 10 to 15 people that I felt throughout my life had done something to hurt me. I felt in the past they did something to hurt me. So I wrote a list, and not all. Some of them I actually physically got thank you cards and wrote them thank you just for. And in the thank you card it just says thank you for being you. Yeah, no, I didn't go into anything deep or spiritual or because I just said thank you for being you. Thank you for being in my life. And I mailed off some of these thank you cards. And some people who I lost touch with, I just kind of sent them thank you because I know wherever they are in the world, once I send it to them, they will receive it. So, but it's so true that the people that drive us crazy are our biggest teachers. And it's hard for people to understand. A lot of people have trouble with that. But I've awoken to that, okay, I have to just love these people and thank them. Love them and thank them for being who I've asked them to be. I don't know if you're aware of a children's book written by Neil Donald Walsh, The Little Soul in the Sun. And I read this book to my grandson all the time because it does explain that in spirit we ask these people to be who remember, we are writing this drama we call our life. we casted each and every person that we meet and come in contact with. We casted that role for them. We wrote the script for them. So and that's kind of what this little children's book kind of reminds us of. That okay, we did this. Okay, it's so good. It's all so wonderful. Please share with our listeners, any upcoming events that you're going to be involved with. I know that you spend half of your time in Australia and half of your time in the UK, but please share with our listeners what's coming up in your near future.
Well, there's a couple of events I'm really looking forward to. One is a retreat I'm leading up in Scotland on an island called Ered. It's this beautiful little island up in the Inner Hebrides. That's May 7 to May 14. That's on my website. All my events are on willpye.com. And the other events for people that are listening in the US, if they want to perhaps get to know me a bit on my YouTube channel, and then consider there's 2 retreats I'm leading in July in East Tennessee, of all places.
Okay.
So in terms of retreats, they're the ones that I'm really looking forward to. There's sort of another wonderful location, well-being conference, which is, it's not quite an island, but it's a bit of land that's almost entirely surrounded by the Powell River. And it's a really, really beautiful place to hang out. And I always joke with people that we do our work there together, exploring and transforming and healing and awakening. But the land, as with Ered as well, seems to do much of the work. It seems to bring much of the energy and clarity for us to use for our own awakening. So there's a couple of events that I'm looking forward to in the coming months. I've also recently launched a show called Awakening Dialogues, which is simply having conversations with other teachers and individuals who are familiar with non-dual consciousness or unity of consciousness, and people can get to know me a little bit by that as well. That's on YouTube and so on, of course.
Wonderful. Wow, it's so amazing. Like I said, I keep meeting new people in the non-dual oneness basically movement, and there's so many new things coming up. I just actually started co-hosting. This week was the first week I did a show. The title of the show is The Truth of Oneness Within, and I'm hosting this program with David Fishman on its Awakening Together Radio, which is actually a 22-hour radio station. It's Awakening Together Radio, your show is entitled Awakening. So it is truly all about awakening to who we truly are and sharing it. And globally, it is it's such a huge movement right now, which before you know it, everyone on the planet is going to be awake. And we're going to be in a whole new reality of peace and love. And it's coming soon. It's coming much sooner than I think most of us realize, which is a wonderful thing. It can't come soon enough. So true, so true. So this, I can't believe we're actually the hour has gone by really, really quick, and it's been a wonderful experience sharing all of this information with you and with the listeners. Was there something? Can you tell us a little bit about your upcoming book? You're working on your second book, and what is the title of that?
It's called Radical Gratitude, and this was going to be a chapter in Blessed with a Brain Tumor, because for me this is really the essence of what I share and what I teach, and it got too big to be a chapter in Blessed with a Brain Tumor, because that book's really about my story and there's a narrative, right. And so this will be a whole book dedicated to gratitude, the practice of gratitude, how to use gratitude, how to work with gratitude for emotional integration, how to work with gratitude for awakening, and to awake to oneness, to really have that experience of our own such that we know what we are. And I've just started writing it in earnest. I've written essays on it here and there for many years, but just in the last few weeks I've actually got down into that discipline of getting the book written, and I'm very much enjoying being in that writing discipline again on a big project, on a book.
Wonderful. Can you share some tips with the listeners on maybe how to get in that mindset of gratitude especially when they're going through really trying times in their lives, either financially, career-wise, or health-wise, or losing a loved one? Can you share with the listeners some tips that may work for them, may help them?
Well, certainly practice can be helpful, both in times of crisis and difficulty and leading up, building up resilience. But when we're faced with really difficult times, to take some time regularly each day to simply be in stillness, to rest, to meditate, to pray, whatever the individual is inclined towards. But the important thing I would suggest is to take that regular time, a half hour each day or whatever it might be, to just give to yourself, being aware, relaxing, allowing things to slow down. And the practice of gratitude, of course, you've shared, can be a wonderfully powerful experience, a wonderfully powerful way of lessening the intensity of suffering, lessening the intensity of difficult times, and developing a higher center of gravity, as it were. And also, of course, sometimes life is just really intense, and in those times, the gratitude with this radical gratitude is to simply open up fully to whatever is happening, whether it be grief or fear of the future, to really be present with that, to open up to our experience in this moment. So often we are moving away from what's happening in this moment.
That's
and this
exactly
is suffering.
That's very true. We don't want to, because I don't want people to think that we're saying suppress your feelings. If you're feeling sad and depressed, pretend they're not there. No, that's not what you need. You can't push away. Your feelings what you're feeling, and you have to really embrace it. Maybe even embrace the pain, embrace the sadness, give it more love. That's what you want to shine light on that feeling. And like you said, quieting, just quieting your mind and loving yourself wherever you're at and whatever you're feeling, but not pushing against it. I think allowing the moment to be the moment and not fight against it is a big part of opening up. And I think I heard you say that in one of your interviews about how that's your first time you were feeling really depressed, and you opened up to it, and you discovered. Can you share that with our listeners?
Yeah, so what I've experienced on a few occasions in life when there have been times of intense emotion, intense pain, blockage in the body, those times when we feel really heavy, where the energy feels heavy, and there's usually a pattern of resistance around it. There's a part of the nervous system, a part of the body, a part of the mind that's contracted, that doesn't want to go there, doesn't want to experience what needs to be experienced. And it's often the not wanting to go there that's actually the problem. It's not it's not the pain that needs to be felt that's so much of a problem. It's our unwillingness to go there. And that takes a lot of energy to push pain away, to not feel. Takes a lot of energy. It's a depressing experience to do this. And so what I've experienced is to really open up, particularly at those times of greatest resistance. And I have found that in the opening up, what wants to be felt, what wants to come through, is allowed to do so all the more quickly and all the more easily. So this developing, this practicing of an embracing, of an accepting of our experience, to really welcome each and every emotion, each and every feeling, whatever's showing up, to love it, to say yes. I like the analogy or the symbol of thinking of those little pains as a little child, thinking of those pains or what we are moving away from as a little child. And my experience has been consistently, whenever there is an opening to what I have been contracted from, that is an experience of awakening, an experience of acceptance, actually allows that which I was resisting to fall away. Whereas when I want it to fall away, it doesn't. It's a kind of paradox.
Right, yes, exactly. Because what we push against persists, and what we let be, just let it be, embrace it, it actually disappears. It dissipates. So that is so true. So we don't want to fight against life. We don't want to fight against our emotions and what's going on. We do have to let them be, and if you feel like crying, cry. And don't feel bad about crying. You have to let those tears flow. You have to let life be and embrace it. And we actually did come here to feel these things. We came to feel. If we didn't want to feel these things, we wouldn't have come into this existence. So This is so true. This is so true. Well, thank you so much, Will. I am so glad that we were able to make this connection, and we're definitely going to stay in touch. And I wish you a wonderful weekend and a beautiful Easter coming up next weekend. We're actually experiencing spring here in the Poconos. I've lived here in the Poconos. We usually don't experience spring until May. I've lived here for 24 years, and usually this time of year we still have a foot of snow on the ground. But we actually are experiencing spring, early March this year for the first time. So this year is definitely going to be an amazing year because things are happening that have never happened before. So this is wonderful. But thank you so much for being our guest on Awake to Oneness Radio. You and I will definitely stay in touch via Facebook and email, and hopefully be doing some wonderful things together. I know you do the retreats. One of the things I would love to do is bring more of those things to the Poconos with the Kyle Foundation. Is a foundation I have started in my son's memory. Kyle stands for Keep Your Light Expanding, and I want to bring more exciting events like that to the Poconos. So we're definitely going to stay in touch.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for having me today, Caroline. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.